stations while I'm in bed. The space cities in the world above, oftentimes astonishing laws, oftentimes are rotten. The most advanced soon dead, forgotten. Daydreams of vividly foretell, smashing beauty, storms in hell. It's a very technical world. Big brains in tight sweaters, broken hearts in simple letters. He was such a curious man until he got dollars in his hand. Every word soon redefined, a new standard, a new time. A world shakes, lovers hate, population stands around a broken plate. A mammoth computer has begun to pump my brain cells with fun. Opportunity blows down the door, good fortune, fame, and more. A huge load of cash arrives, rockets in my heart collide. Fill my head, power stations while I lie in bed, space cities in the sea above, oftentimes astonishing love, oftentimes rotten. The most advanced soon dead, forgotten. Daydreams vividly foretell, smashing beauty, storms in hell. Space cities, worlds above, oftentimes astonishing love.
This is a message from Washington, D.C., but I'm sending it from London in occupied England, from under the shadow of the giant cockroach. Well, someone in England is trying to sell us fallout shelters with chemical toilets for $1,000 apiece. After all, they say, look at Hiroshima now, a thriving business community making a hefty profit, and not necessarily labor-intensive either. And that's a consideration. And don't forget that Richard Nixon opened the Hiroshima Pepsi-Cola plant in 1964. I was writing this message in the starlight room of an international hotel long after the race for the planets had faded into post-imperial America, in its most decorative and elaborate stage of Rococo missile weapons MX systems, the Louis XIV Deterrent. It all began back in '81 in Washington, as I was quietly watching them selling Lysol to the tune of Beethoven's Fifth on TV, and thinking about the 39% of British adults who expect a nuclear war in their lifetime. In Washington, the glittering limos were gliding through the city, hugging the roadways like giant armored insects from a science fiction movie, as I remembered that 50% of a class of children in a high school in North London thought that Britain should have unilateral disarmament. The TV interrupted to say, call the toll-free number for more details of World War III. Brought to you by courtesy of Delphic Balm for sore and chafed generals. Naturally, 50% of this class of children thought that the US would start the nuclear war. Well, over the next 5 years, Ronald Reagan plans to spend $225 billion. This is over and above the $1 trillion already budgeted for defense, or attack according to where you live, by Jimmy Carter. As Mr. Reagan said in his inaugural speech, I will act. Meanwhile, on the West Coast, someone has stolen and melted down some radioactive gold and made it into jewelry. And gold rings are being checked for radioactivity all over America. A new, acquirable commodity, which accumulates. This is brought to you by courtesy of the military-industrial complex. Our sponsors say that this is essential defense spending, and although $17 billion a year would provide adequate food, water, education, health, and housing for everyone in the world, this includes the third world. This would probably take out at least 2 weeks of the world's expenditure on arms in any 1 year. And this is clearly unreasonable, untenable, uncivilized, un-British, un-American, and unhuman. As I ate my breakfast, it was a Tallahassee eye-opener, I expect you know those, I realized, as I squeezed the ketchup bottle, that it didn't worry me too much that someone had just worked out that there wasn't enough cement in the world to build the US's proposed new weapons system. Purely defensive, of course. I ate my home fries and sunny side up, really toying with the idea that the measuring unit of strontium-90 is called a sunshine unit. Feeling slightly uneasy that the US has enough nuclear weapons to kill the Russians 40 times over, whilst the Russians can only kill the Americans 20 times over. I climbed into the suede transit bus to the airport, a little perturbed that 2% of the world's stockpile of nuclear weapons would be adequate to destroy Britain entirely. Well, from Britain, your giant aircraft carrier moored just off mainland Europe, where the First World War was fought and the Second World War was fought. And there's a retired general saying on the TV that he doesn't think that America would mind fighting the Third World War in Europe if you dummies will let us. Good night. I think the dream has turned into a nightmare.
From earliest human existence, there appear to be two fundamental ways of thinking, intuition and analytical reason, which influence our feelings and actions. One aspect of my research considers how these two phases of thought are translated into neurophysiology and how they differ physically. What happens in the brain at the instant of intuition, that is, when we're experiencing an idea, insight, or inspiration, and during the moments of expressing the intuition? I've proposed that in the first instance, both hemispheres of the brain function as a single sphere in focusing information. For a millionth of a second or less, there is a fusion or merging of cerebral processes. By contrast, during the period of analytical reasoning, when you're thinking about what you've just thought, one hemisphere is more dominant than the other. At this time, the fission or splitting of these processes occurs. I refer to the former as cerebral fusion and the latter as cerebral fission. Both phases of thought seem to sustain each other. I would like to believe that the instant of intuition marks the convergence of artistic and scientific perspectives, like two forces overcoming their complementarity to form one greater force or line of concentration. I call this condition the plasma state of mind, the fourth and highest state of consciousness, within which there are varying degrees of intensities, like flashes of lightning. One implication is that the perception of any idea is neither art nor science-oriented, yet the expression of it is. In order to look at the differences between cerebral fusion and cerebral fission, it was clear that some outside source, other than the brain itself, would have to serve as a model. Already, I'd been recording many curious similarities between the principles of plasma fusion reactors and the physiology of the brain. I wondered whether the design of the nuclear devices are extensions or reflections of the human organism. If they are, they may be useful as models for understanding the dynamics of this organism, offering clues to the otherwise invisible operations of the brain. I began to examine the possibilities of using reactor technologies to reveal the fusion effects in the brain. I wanted to display these effects, not as an electroencephalogram which only sketches silhouettes of the brain's electrical activity, but as a multi-dimensional view of the internal workings at very special moments. According to my proposition, it follows that there are three fundamental fusion reactions corresponding to the instant of intuition. One is a toroidal effect, another a magnetic mirror effect, and the third is a laser fusion effect, any one of which might occur within millionths of a second, and each of which would possess a unique configuration of energy fields and currents. Like fingerprints, they are individual and traceable. Eventually, these ever-changing fields may be plotted and studied, providing a more complete picture of all our mental processes. Remember, regardless of who you are, what you are, or where you are, these effects are occurring inside you. They are electrochemical artifacts of your brain and mind interactions.
If you understand that term to have such a broad sense, but you speak to an audience that understands the term to have a somewhat narrower sense, it lends to your remarks a quality of sensationalism and a force that's strictly locutionary, just strictly linguistic. It's kind of empty rhetoric.
Yeah. But as much I could do it, I gave already the proofs that it is not only sensation, but it has to be sensation. Otherwise, it would be of no interest. It has to be sensationally. So it has also to be dramatically, because it is a drama. So it is a new way to play the Hamlet on stage. You know, in the street you can see people, they play the Hamlet better than me. Yeah. And that is the whole sense of the thing. So it stays in a very energy in the middle of the understanding of art, and covers also demands of people who are interested in high developed character of painting and high developed ideas of architecture and sculpture. It covers it. But it covers it not even, it is the premise to come to quality in painting. So I say only simple. He who is not, or she who is not interested in social sculpture will never come in result with painting. There will never be an interesting painting anymore. If there is not a new soil prepared, a new humus prepared for all these questions, for the idea of humankind and his ability with his spirit. Because this solves the energy problem. We are not dependent on fuel. We can also survive with a glass of water. Because we have the willpower, the feeling power, and the power of thought. The power of imagination, transformation, inspiration, intuition. And if we go on with this energy, we are independent on fuel. So I must check by myself.
Mr. B?
I think now, oh yes, another question.
Oh, okay,
Mr. B, can I speak?
Continue, yeah.
Do you have an American favorite artist? And why?
Oh yes, I could tell you about.
Why?
Why?
Who?
But
Who?
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock.
Why?
Because he made a kind of generalization, yes, you know, which impulsed me to do also a kind of generalization, but not in the field of painting, in the field of the energy problem.
Right.
I found always that Jackson Pollock had a relation to the problem of energies, you know. It was a very mesmerizing kind of painting. It was a power field.
Right. Could he be wrong, though?
You know? But
Could he have been wrong? Could he have been wrong?
no. No. Never. Never. And so did Elvis Presley.